For a while, I felt like I really did have everything a woman my age could want, and that feeling kept me warm even on the grayest days, when it rained all day and the windows of our country house outside of Seattle were covered in a foggy pattern, as if someone was deliberately trying to hide us from the world. I had a husband who worked long hours but always found the strength to come home on time, open the door with a gentle smile, and set his bag down by the door, only to kneel down next to our boys, laughing and demanding that he listen to their stories about monsters hiding under the bed, or to try the peanut butter sandwiches they had made themselves, smearing the kitchen floor to ceiling with peanut butter. I was the mother of 2 healthy boys, both under 6, who believed in the magic of fairy tales, and those evenings when they listened to me with bated breath were the most precious moments of my life. In the early days, even my mother-in-law, smiling through clenched teeth, tried to create the appearance of harmony, and it seemed to me that everything was working out just as I had always dreamed. My name is Patricia. I am 32 years old and I am married to Tom, a mechanical engineer, a man with golden hands who believed that duct tape could fix not only pipes and old toys, but also cracked relationships and even his own mother. We lived in a modest but cozy 2-story house with a swing set in the yard where the boys chased each other until sunset, and a refrigerator covered in crayon marks, as if our life itself were a large canvas. From the outside, it probably seemed like we had everything, and I really thought so too, until one day Tom's mother, Beatty, offered to help. To most people, she was the picture of elegance and quiet grandeur, always wearing a pearl necklace, with a stage-perfect manner and a soft, caring voice. For the first year of our marriage, I tried hard to treat her like that, as a woman worthy of respect. But I quickly learned that a person's true colors are revealed not in what she shows the world, but in what she does when no one is looking. Beatty had a way of turning kindness into a weapon. I remember our first dinner at their house in Spokane. Tom ordered a juicy ribeye steak with rosemary butter. His father, Gaspard, chose grilled salmon, and I was served a plate of steamed vegetables and a clear broth that smelled more like dishwater than food. "You watch your figure, right?" she said, smiling a fixed smile, as if her face were frozen in a photograph from a church directory. I never said anything about my weight, but I had to smile and thank her, although everything inside me sank. From that moment on, a whole series of little things began, from which a heavy picture gradually emerged. When she made hot cocoa for the boys, my glass accidentally went unnoticed. At Christmas, when everyone received beautiful chocolates, my box was either in an old wrapper or some strange one, clearly not the brand one. And all this was accompanied by her phrases, said with the same motionless smile. "It must be hard to be at home and not work, but the children need someone around." Tom never noticed this, or perhaps did not want to notice. Each time he repeated, "She only wants the best for you." This is how she shows her love. Love. Once she gave me a cookbook called Simple Dishes for Culinary Talents, as if hinting that my cooking did not deserve any other name. And then, at our son's birthday party, she posted a photo of her 3 favorite people, Tom, Gaspar, and the birthday boy, cutting me out of the picture entirely. Still, I convinced myself I could handle it because she wasn't living with us, and Tom, even if he didn't fully understand it, was still on my side. Then there was chocolate. It was summer, and we'd taken the boys to Spokane for a long weekend. One day, while Tom was out running errands with their dad and the kids were asleep upstairs, Beatty appeared on the patio holding a dainty china plate. "I brought you something sweet," she said. "Belgian truffles, a treat for a tired mom." I hesitated, but took one. The chocolate had an oddly matte finish, and one truffle had a dented corner. I thanked her, put a piece in my mouth, and heard a crunch. Chocolate isn't supposed to crunch. The taste was bitter, dusty, with an unpleasant grainy texture. "Yours is special," Beatty said, looking at me too closely. "I saved it just for you." Something in her voice made me shudder. I wrapped the remaining truffles in a napkin, saying I would eat them later, and she didn't object. An hour later, I was doubled over in pain. A sharp, stabbing cramp in my stomach. I was hot and cold. I barely made it to the downstairs bathroom and collapsed on the tiled floor, shaking and gasping for breath. Tom found me half an hour later, pale and sweating. "Are you okay?" he asked, pulling me up. "Did you eat something?" I whispered. He helped me up, made tea, put the kids to bed, but I didn't tell him about the chocolate. Not yet. The next morning, taking out the trash, I noticed a crumpled candy wrapper in the bin. White foil, old-fashioned writing. I scooped it out with a spoon, smoothed it out on the counter, and read, "Best Buy, December 2012." And it was 2022. I stared at the numbers for a full minute, my throat going dry. Beatty had given me chocolate that had expired 10 years ago. I stuffed the wrapper into my jeans and saved it. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but throwing it away seemed wrong. That night, when the kids were finally asleep and the house was quiet, I decided to tell Tom everything that had been bothering me since that night in Spokane. I pulled the crumpled wrapper out of my pocket, laid it on the table, and trying to keep my voice from shaking, explained what had happened. Tom took the wrapper, squinted as if he wanted to read not only the letters, but also my thoughts, and then quietly said that most likely his mother simply did not pay attention to the date. "She doesn't check everything, you know," he added in a tired voice, as if it was natural and forgivable. "Tom," I said slowly, looking at him as if I was seeing the man I had lived with for almost a decade for the first time. "It's not just expired. It's ancient. When I ate it, it crunched. She couldn't have not known that. She said it was just for me." He looked away, ran his hand over his cheek, then returned his eyes to the wrapper, now with noticeable embarrassment. "Are you saying she did it on purpose?" he asked, almost in a whisper. "You think she didn't?" I looked straight at him, and he immediately hesitated, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and sighed heavily. "Look, even if she did, what are you going to do? Blame her? She'll say it was a mistake, and you know what that's going to lead to. Months of drama and tears." I barely kept myself from screaming. Everything inside me was seething with anger, with helplessness, with the fact that he was defending her yet again. "Tom," I said quietly but firmly, "she's been doing this kind of thing for years." It wasn't an accident. He rubbed his eyes tiredly, and his voice was a mixture of tenderness and irritation. "Patricia, I love you, but you're making this into something it probably isn't." I said nothing, because I knew there was no point in arguing any further. The next morning, while Tom was taking the kids to the park, I called my brother. Evan was 2 years younger than me, lived in Sacramento, and worked in retail IT. We talked often, but I hadn't mentioned chocolate yet. This time I spilled the beans. He listened in silence, and when I finished, there was silence on the line. "You need to install cameras," he finally said. "What?" I laughed nervously. "Hidden ones. They're cheap and easy to use. You're going to visit her again, right?" I sighed. "Yeah. She invited us to Whidbey Island for a long weekend in 2 weeks, a rental cabin." "Perfect," Evan said. "Evan, this isn't a crime drama," I said tiredly. "Maybe not. But if she's doing what you think she's doing, you need proof, especially if Tom keeps turning a blind eye." He was right, and I didn't like that he was right. 3 days later, a courier brought a small box. Inside were 5 tiny button-sized cameras, a portable router, and a note in Evan's handwriting. "Don't wait for another chocolate bar. Record everything." I fiddled with the device for a long moment, like it was a key to a lock I was afraid to open, and then packed it into my duffel bag, just in case. That evening, Tom came home from work. "Mom says the house on Whidbey has 2 guest rooms and a view of the deck," he said, undressing in the hallway. "She even booked a private chef for Saturday night." "Of course she did," I blurted out. He blinked, looking at me in surprise. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled thinly. "Nothing." But from that moment on, I knew I wasn't taking my bathing suits. I was taking evidence. April on Whidbey Island greeted us with damp, cool air, fog that clung to the crowns of the pine trees, and the scent of pine that seemed to get into your lungs and stay there. The cottage Beatty had rented was on the edge of the woods, with a narrow gravel driveway leading to the house, 2 porches, and a shared kitchen. She greeted us on the porch, wearing a quilted vest and a white turtleneck, as if she were both modest and elegant. Gaspar stood behind us holding a thermos and nodded neutrally as we approached. "So good to see you all," she cooed, hugging the boys and barely touching my shoulder with her cold fingers. "Patricia, you look rested." I forced a smile. "Thank you. You too." Tom carried our bags inside and immediately set about helping the children settle in. BT showed us around the house, although the cottage was barely 100 square meters. "You and Tom will be here." She pointed to a room with bunk beds. "The boys can sleep in the bottom bunks. Gaspar and I will have the master bedroom." The kitchen was shared, with a long wooden table in the center. "Very sociable," she said with a smile, "just like a real family." The first night was quiet. Dinner was simple: fried chicken, salad, bread. Beatty handed out plates to everyone but me, and handed mine last, too late, too ostentatiously, as always. There was no crispy skin or potato on my plate, just stewed cabbage. I said nothing. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, I pulled out the bag of equipment Evan had sent me from my bag. 5 cameras, 3 chargers, a pocket Wi-Fi router, instructions memorized. I waited until the house was completely asleep before I began to act. Camera 1 is in the corner of the kitchen cabinet opposite the countertop. Camera 2 is above the refrigerator, aimed at the sink and trash can. Camera 3 is in the hallway disguised as a coat hook opposite Beatty's room. Camera 4 is in a vase on the dining room table. The 5th one was in our bedroom, just in case. Everything synced with the cloud and with my laptop, which I kept locked in the closet. By 2 o'clock in the morning, the house was quiet again. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen where Bida was already humming something quiet and old-fashioned sweet, and that voice of hers, light and combed, as if taken from a black and white postcard, stretched across the room to the ceiling when she, handing me a cup, whispered, "Good morning, honey. I let you sleep," so that I didn't even have time to answer, because Tom was already in the yard with the boys, distracting them by catching bugs and dragonflies. And she, without asking, filled my cup with aromatic tea and put a box on the table, neatly packed with a bright picture of a bento, which she proudly announced as a purchase from a small delicatessen in town, explaining that these were imported ingredients and that I deserved something special. Then the writing on the lid, clearly written in her hand, saying Patricia, left no doubt that the gift was intended for me, and I felt a chill, because it is better not to ask if anyone else has such attentiveness. And that same day, when the boys dozed off and Tom went with his father into the forest for branches and conversations, I quietly returned to the room, closed the door, and opened the laptop, turning on the recording from the kitchen and rewinding the image back to the timestamp of about 10:46 in the morning to see how Beatty alone, in thin gloves, without fuss and without spectators, takes out a tiny Tupperware container from her purse, opens it, and inside there is something dark, moving legs, a live cockroach. And then, without haste and with the same impeccable dignity, she takes out an insect with tweezers, places it on a bed of rice in the bento as if it were a precious stone, sprinkles sesame seeds on top, and smooths the surface as carefully as if she were decorating a cake. And I, having frozen the image, almost fell over, because I thought I knew the limits of her cruelty, but I did not imagine that she was so cold-blooded and calculating as to do this deliberately, waiting for my reaction. In the evening, when Beatty, with increased theatrical pathos, announced that she had prepared something special for the final dinner in the form of those very gourmet bento boxes from that very store, extolling them almost as heirlooms and naming a price that Tom repeated with some pride, almost $700. I watched her lay the boxes out on the table one by one, each one tied with gold thread and labeled in her perfect handwriting, and when the box with my name on it was in my hands, I felt everything inside me that you can't put into words boiling up. So without thinking, I stood up and walked over to the trash can, and smiling dully to myself, dropped the package containing her care into it, which made Beatty freeze and Tom jump up from his chair, shouting that it had cost $140, and Father Tom tactfully put down his fork, and Beatty's voice, with growing protest, exclaimed, "This was made especially for you." But I had already gone to get my laptop and returned with it, setting it on the table next to her china cup and saying quietly, "Look what was made, especially for me." And this time my fingers didn't shake as I pressed play. The grainy, cold video showed her closing the door, pulling on latex gloves, taking a black container and silver tweezers from her purse. And then a series of gasps rippled through the room, my eldest son covering his face with his hands, Tom whispering, "Oh my God," and I froze, because I watched her calmly place a live insect on a rice paddy, sprinkle sesame seeds on it, and smooth it out like it was a treat. And when Beatty, quickly dropping her offended innocence persona, snapped that the footage could be anything and that someone could have edited the footage, I calmly turned my attention to the second clip, which was loading in my hands and showing the scene from a different angle. This camera was recording her profile in great detail: the tweezers, the insect, the box with my name. Tom pulled away from the table so abruptly that the wooden legs of the chair creaked on the floor as if trying to hold him in place, and his voice, trembling but full of pain, sounded hollow and terribly sincere. "Mama, no. Please tell me it's not what it seems." Beatty froze for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line, and I half expected her to choose her usual mask again, to try to feign incomprehension or innocent surprise. But something in her face changed, as if the mask had cracked, and the real, rough, ruthless, hateful expression burst out. "She doesn't belong here," she hissed, pointing at me. "She never belonged in this house." Then Gaspar spoke for the first time. His voice, usually calm and muffled, sounded sharp like steel on glass. "Beatty, you poisoned her, and you poisoned Tom." But she didn't seem to hear him and spat out words that were filled with despair. "Since the day you brought her here, Thomas, took her from me, made me forget who sacrificed himself to raise you, since that day she's been ruining everything." Tom's hands were shaking, but his voice was firm. "That doesn't give you the right." Then Beatty slammed her palm on the table, the cup rattled, and her scream filled the room. "I gave you life!" And she comes with her stupid smiles and her college degree, acting like she's better than me. She pointed her finger at me with such force that I felt the air between us tighten, but I didn't back away, although my chest was constricted with pain, and the boys began to cry quietly, clinging to Tom. I looked at them and, with difficulty keeping my voice from shaking, asked, "How exactly did you want me to leave, Beatty? Slowly poisoning me? Slipping tainted food into me to make me sick until I run away?" She twisted her lips into a sneer. "If you were smarter, you would, but you are too stubborn. You always need to prove me wrong." Then Gaspard stood up, his usually gentle face dark and heavy, and the words fell from his lips like a sentence. "You tried to poison the mother of my grandchildren. You endangered the children who would have eaten from this box. You have disgraced not only yourself, but the entire family." Beatty blinked as if she had been slapped. "Gaspard, stop." Her voice wavered, but he did not stop. "Tom, take Patricia and the boys and return to Seattle immediately. Today. I will deal with her." Tom nodded silently, hugging the children, and at that moment Beatty screamed so piercingly that it sent shivers down my spine. "Don't you dare leave me, Thomas. I'm your mother." But he didn't turn around again. Not once. We packed our things in silence, and by midnight we were sitting in the car on the ferry, the boys asleep in the back seat, Tom driving, his fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that they were white. Only when the darkness of the water surrounded us did he whisper, "I'm sorry." I looked at the black surface and quietly answered, "This is how it's supposed to be." I didn't want to see this. I kept telling myself she was kind. He swallowed, finding the words with difficulty. "I'll never let her near you or the children again. I swear it." and for the first time in many years, I believed him. The next morning, I went to the local police station, flash drive in hand. The officer on duty, reviewing the footage, stopped it in midstream and said, "Ma'am, this is a criminal offense." "Are you pressing charges?" I nodded weakly. "Yes." Within a week, the court had issued a restraining order. Beatty was no longer allowed to come near us, to call, to write, to cross our threshold, but she still tried. Blocked calls at midnight, letters from disposable addresses, handwritten envelopes with no return address, sometimes apologies, sticky and empty, sometimes threats. "You'll regret turning him against me." I took all this evidence to the station. Then Gaspar called. His voice sounded tired, as if the years had fallen on him in a single day. "I filed for divorce," he said. "She's crumbling. She's banning phones in the house, insisting there are cameras everywhere, accusing the neighbors of surveillance. She's not thinking straight anymore, Patricia. I should have intervened sooner. I closed my eyes, relief and sadness intertwining inside me." "I'm sorry, Gaspar." But he said, "No. You did what none of us could. You exposed her." 3 months passed. I was standing at the checkout line at the grocery store when my phone vibrated, a blocked number, and against my better judgment, I answered. "Patricia." Biddy's voice was weak, hoarse. "Thank God you answered." I remained silent. "Gaspar is gone. I can't pay the rent. I can't buy food. Please don't let me starve." I still remained silent, but her words flowed like a pathetic song. "You're a mother. You know what it's like to sacrifice yourself. I only did everything because I loved him. I couldn't lose my son." I took a deep breath, my hands as strong as stone. "You wanted me to go away. Now you're the one left alone." She whined, "Please, Patricia." I said coldly, "If you're hungry, try what you gave me," and hung up. When I got home, Tom was sitting on the porch, swinging on the old swing, the boys running in the grass, their laughter ringing out like wind chimes. He looked up as I approached. "Everything okay?" he asked. I smiled, truly free for the first time. Better than ever. Because in that moment, with the sun warm on my skin and the children's laughter cutting through the air, I knew we were free. Not because Beatty was gone, but because her power over us was gone. Forever.